About the topic for today is talking about how to write research methods in journal papers. I decided to bring some general and from informations from the methodology chapters that probably you want to develop for your journal paper, and also some practical advices that came from uh, different reviewers that I received through submissions of my papers to them. And at the end, I will summarize some of them and share with you guys. And I hope you make some advantage from them in writing your papers. Let's start our talk today with this very simple questions, and if you don't mind, probably one or two guys can on the microphone and answer to the question: What is a research? And as a researcher, what do you think about the research? Anyone has any idea wants to share with us? Feel free to on your microphone. If I'm not sure that you are able to on your microphone, or you can make use of meeting chat to write something about what is research. What do you think about that? Any idea from the team? Okay, I bring the very short descriptions about the research, right? Right, to investigate issues, very good. What else can share with us? Research is a process whereby a researcher engages in a small set of logical steps to add to the knowledge. Very good. Yes, these are the things that we do research. But the definitions of research that's presented by Criswell is a small set of logical steps. The first things before you start your research, you need to remember that you are not going to solve the problem of the world with your paper. Therefore, you need to be narrow enough to conduct the research. Sometimes we are eager to solve the problem of entire of industry with one research. That probably is not possible. Therefore, the first things that you need to do and deals with the methodology and method of research is the way that you bring a small set of logical steps that you want to do for the research. And the three small steps that you need to take in your research, which shape the methodology of your work, is setting a question and then collect the data to answer that question and present the answer to the questions. This sequence and this process and these steps should be clearly reflected in your paper. Uh, Sometimes when you define the research questions, at the end of the day, you may not able to answer properly those questions. Then you may not get the chance to be accepted. Therefore, the method and methodology of your research should direct you from raising the questions to providing the answer to the questions. As your friend also pointed, absolutely, the reasons that we are doing the research is to do some adding to the knowledge and also improving some practices. Again, it is your decision as a researcher that you want only to add the knowledge to the current body of knowledge, or you want to do some contribution to the practice. The best research mostly uh, contribute in both directions, adding to the knowledge and also improving the practice. Therefore, when you set up your methodology chapter in your dissertation or using the methodology for the journal paper, you also need to show your contribution to the current body of knowledge by providing a proper literature review, and also to showing the gap in the knowledge, and also by conducting some research in the industry that you are working for, and showing how your research will improve the practice as well. If you have the combination of adding knowledge and improving the practice, it's definitely increase your chance of getting accepted or make your paper to be interested to many readers. About the methodology and methods, because I saw some students, at least some students of mine here, sometimes confused between the methodology and methods. This structure of the research mostly shape the methodology of your work, and you need to set up these six steps or six processes in your research. The reason that I brought these six processes over here is to tell you that methodology or method sections is not only one part of the paper. The method section should be reflected from introduction until the closing or the conclusion of your work. In all sections, you need to show the methods that you use in order to develop the research. The first step or first process that we have in our world of research is identifying a research problem. The method that you use to identify the problem should be reflected under this part, that mostly in the journal paper you assign it or show the problem at the introduction of the paper. You need to show the readers and especially the reviewers about the methods that you use to identify the problem. Is it a problem for one specific case? Therefore, you need to deal with the case study or methods of doing the case study. It is a problem for one industry, then you need to show the evidence that that problem existed, probably by conducting the literature review. Or this is the national problem, for example, you will refer to some reports, some statistics, some news. Therefore, identifying the research problem is one key task for researcher to justify that that problem existed. And then you do the literature review. The methods that you conduct the literature review again is part of the methodology or the methods of doing the research, how you collect your data, how you narrow the literature in order to reach to the uh, key areas related to your research and make sure that most majority of related literature in that area has been reviewed. Again, methods of reviewing the literature need to be reflected in your paper. Specifying a purpose or aims and objectives of the research. It is a very important to know about the research methods when you developing your research objectives. I saw some students and also some papers that got rejected because of improper definition of research aims and objectives. You set up your objectives in qualitative basis, but you conduct your research in quantitative manner, or vice versa. You set up your probably your research objectives to identify the correlation between some variables, and at the end of the day we see that you made advantage from qualitative data collection and qualitative analysis. Therefore, the method of study should reflect also on the way that you are dealing the research aims and objectives. And the fourth step is the collecting the data. The method of data collections again need to be explained in your paper. Which method of data collection you use? Have you used the survey? You use the interviews? You use experimental data? You use existing data? You want to do some interview or focus group? Anything that related to the data collections, then the methods that you use to collect the data again should be reflected on this part of the paper. From collecting data, we will go to analyzing it. Again, the method of analyzing the data should be reflected there. And the way or methods that you provide your reports and evaluate the data, is it going to be presented in the form of the table, figures, teams, and so on, should be reflected on the reports. As you can see, from beginning until the end of one research paper, you need to deal with the research methods a lot. And under each part, you need to clearly define the methods that you are using, and they must have some relationship between each other. If you're using quantitative, you need to make sure that The reviewed literature also support this study can be conducted in the quantitative base. The purpose of the study or the aims and objectives should be set up in quantitative base. Then the data should be collected based on the quantitative and then going to the analyzing and providing a report, which all be related to the quantitative methods of study. Overall, advice that they can bring to you is before you start your research, you need to uh, consider that are you going to make the research in qualitative or quantitative or make a combination of the mixed methods. It depends to the area of your work. For certain disciplines like those that we are doing in the area of project management, I can advise you to make advantage from mixed methods, which increase your chance of getting accepted with many journal papers nowadays. They are looking for more method of data collections, more method of data analysis to support each other in order to increase the chance of getting accepted. But in certain areas, you're only focusing on the experiments or the numbers that you can extract from the experiment and laboratory works, then probably a quantitative research is the only one that you can deal with it. Before you start to write for the journal, again, you need to know about the nature of that journal. Is it qualitative or quantitative based, or they are going to accept any form of methodological approach for the paper. I have just summarized, you know much better than me about the qualitative and quantitative research, but these are the general framework that you probably need to uh, clearly reflect them in your paper. If you use a quantitative research, you need to know that you are dealing with objective matters, right? It should be generalizable. You deals with the numbers and you have mostly a deductive approach for it. You're going to test a theory. If your research is in qualitative base, it is subjective. Uh, Probably you're not able to generalize your finding because you have limited number of cases. It is mostly inductive. You are dealing with creating probably a new theories and mostly deals with the words. These are also helping you when you set up your objectives to know that your objectives of the research should have a generalizable style. You need to show the correlations, therefore, some concept related to the existing theories should be uh, included in your research aims and objectives, and also through the literature review for quantitative research. I provided some of the key characteristics for qualitative research over here. And again, when you write for a journal, probably you need to consider them because the reviewer are looking for the way that you probably conduct, for example, your literature review. Are you going to find the trends of something? Therefore, you need to have a firm literature review about the past practices, the gap in the literature, and the way that you are going to contribute with it, and also the way that you extract the variables of the study in quantitative research is very important. You need to show that there is some theoretical framework at the background of your variables that you extracted. The models that you generated should be rooted in some theories, and therefore literature review considered as a key part in quantitative research practices. And therefore you need to deal with the collecting the numbers, right? The data collection should be in numeric form. If you develop a questionnaire, therefore your survey need to prepare in the styles that you can convert the answers to the numbers, and then the numbers can make some sense to the readers and to the analysis that later on you will do. For example, you make advantage from the Likert scale and so on. There are certain characteristics with qualitative research that also uh, summarized over here, and I would like to ask you later on, probably you consult with them. Uh, I'm not telling that the literature review has no role. It's a minor role in the qualitative to justify, but you need to justify the problem with the literature. You need to have a proper literature review when you're doing the qualitative research as well. But the role of literature review in quantitative mostly is higher because you just want to test the theory. In qualitative, you want to present something new, and therefore your idea and the way that you do the interpretations of different facts is different from the quantitative base. This is the reason that we ask you to decide about the methodology of the research at the beginning, and then based on that, provide your framework of the study. And after you decide about the form of research, which is qualitative or quantitative or the mixed method, then you need to describe about the method of data collection. Uh, there are uh, five general forms of the data collections, and of course you can add more to this one. It's a survey, experiments, existing data, interview, and doing some form of observations are the key five areas that's related to the way that we are collecting the data. Um, since we have a variety of disciplines at HPP, I think seven different main disciplines we have at HPP. Some making advantage from the social science, making advantage from more research on the survey and interviews. I decided to bring more about the two, and also some may advantage from the experiments. Then, based on some experience that I had with publishing with journals related to the civil engineering part, also have provided some of the areas that the reviewers are looking for when you are making advantage from specific tools to collect the data. For example, if you collect your data through the survey, these are at least the five key questions or five areas that the reviewers are looking for. Therefore, in your uh, paper, clearly you need to reflect and show how did you design the questions? Are you designing the questions by yourself, or you made advantage from structured questions or standard questions that already tested by other researchers? Clearly, you need to justify them. And what form did they take? Is it a multiple choice? Is it a rating scale? And so on should clearly be defined in your methods. And then you need to define where, when, and how the survey was conducted. Geographical location is important. You need to show that this research conducted, for example, in Malaysia, or this research is a global research that we shared and the participants from all around the world are able to be there. When it conducted, the year, if it even the months that you on the survey, for example, it's open from June to July for 1 year, for 1 month, for 2 years. It depends to the nature. Mostly you need to make it in maximum of 3 months. Depends to the area of your works, because we know that the knowledge, the environment, the cultures, everything may change through the times. Therefore, you need to show that the data collected from a specific period of time, mostly 1 or 2 months or 3 months time. And how the survey was conducted. Have you done the survey through the phone, through the mail, through online, in person? The way that you conduct the survey also need to be reflected in your method. How long did participants have to present? This one is mostly it's optional, but it is good to include that the survey probably take, for example, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the time of participants, or this survey took 2 hours of the participants because I provided, for example, thousands of questions there. Before you need to justify that, you need to also include the the time that probably need to complete your survey. How did you find and select the participant is a key areas that I saw many people miss this part and get rejected from the reviewer because sometimes they consider this is a critical part that should be included in the paper. How did you find and select the participant? The method of selection should be clearly defined and why you selected this group of people or this group of respondents to be targeted for this study. Inclusion and exclusion criteria should be clearly included in your methods. And what was the sample size and the response rate? These also need to justify. I saw some papers and especially some of the students that uh, reaching to 98% of the response rate. You need to justify why others only have 10 to 15% of the response rate, and suddenly in your research you reach to 98%, 90%, even 80% of response rate. You need to share the secret that probably you had to reach to that large amount of the response rate with your research. What's the sample size and what is the response rate also need to be explained. If you're using the interview or focus group for collecting the data, these are the key areas again that as a reviewer we are looking for. Again, you need to describe where, when, and how the interview is conducted, geographical locations, the durations, the time, and how long was that, and how the interview conducted. It is in person, using the phone, using Skype, using any multimedia to communicate with the respondents. What form did the interview take? Is it a structured interview, semi-structured, or it is unstructured interview? How long the interviews in average takes? Maybe you can point the minimum and the maximum time and the average time between the all interviews that you have conducted. How did you find and select the participant is also again very important part for the focus group and interview um, data collections. You need to justify why these people included in the interviews, why you exclude some groups from the interviews. These are all need to be justified, and how many people took part in your interviews and how you make sure that the data saturations happen need to be included in the method sections. If you missed any of them, yeah, you may get major corrections or you will get some in worst scenario maybe you get rejected from that journal if you don't have a firm methods of collecting the data. For those who are dealing with the experimental studies, especially those in the building technology and making advantage from labs or experimental research to collect the data. These are the key areas that you need to deal with them and also explain them well in your research method part of the paper. You need to provide full details of the tools, techniques, standards, and procedures that you use. Sometimes you miss to talk about the standards that you use. Therefore, if you make any mix, for example, for the materials or making a new form of a concrete, for example, therefore you need to also show that why you selected, for example, 10% of fiber to be in your mix. Why not 15? Why not 12? Why not 25? Therefore, you need to justify in your methods about the uh, standards and procedures also that you use. How did you design the experiment? Again, it's another part that you need to reflect it in your method section. How did you find and select the materials? You cannot simply say that because the materials are available here and I use them. You need to have some reason and justifications of the selecting of a specific type of materials for your mix. And also, uh, it is especially important to give enough details for another researcher if they want to do exactly the same research. in your area. Therefore, I'm telling that the method sections in the paper looks like to be a recipe. You need to provide, especially in the experimental studies, about all the materials that you use, about the weights that you use, about the mix that you use, the standards, the way that you provide the materials, the way that you provide your mix, the way that you cure them, all should be clearly defined and enable another researcher to exactly follow your instruments to create the exact form of material or mix for the paper, for the research that they probably wants to do. These are the key areas that need to be considered with uh, still I have time, right? With experiments. If you are using the existing data, then these are the areas that should be conducted. Some nowadays we have the concept of large data. If you find access, for example, to the industry related data, you want to do some analysis on the data. Again, it is a very good area to increase your chance to be accepted because many journals nowadays looking for big data and the way that you making advantage from big data to uh, generalize new ideas, even develop the theories, develop the or test the theories in the industry. If you're using the existing data, you need to explain how you gathered and select data for inclusion in your analysis. Where did you source the data? Is it a reliable source? Have you paid for it? uh, about the data security matters all need to be explained. How was the data originally generated and produced need to be explained. And what criteria did you use to select data range? Because there are lots of data maybe available in the organization or in the data store, and you just using part of it, and therefore you need to justify why this part of data only used for developing the study. If you do the observation, not sure how many of you doing, but I remember that some students from the architectural background using the observation in their research and also in the area of building technology, especially when they want to do some research about the traffic solutions and finding solutions for traffics in different parts of Ireland. They made advantage from observations. And when you want to write a paper based on observation, again, you need to clearly define where, when, and how you conducted the observations, what group or community did you observe, and the reason behind it, and how you find access to them, and how long did you spend to complete your observation, and how did you record your data? Is it recording by using, for example, the camera? Are you using a note taking and so on? The way that you provide your observation, is it a clear observations that everyone know about you, or you use the method of hidden observations? The people do not know that you are observing them. If you want to do it at the hidden one, probably you need to get some confirmations. And therefore, all procedures that you have done in doing the observations for collecting the data need to be reflected in your paper as well. Here you are, you collect your data, and then you need to analyze it. Am I right? Collecting data without analyzing doesn't have any worth, and therefore you may not get the chance to be accepted. After you collect the data and justify the data collected, for example, in qualitative or quantitative way, and this is the way that I collected the data, you need to analyzing them. For quantitative data, you need to make advantage from a specific analysis technique. And before you start your analyzing the data, you need to discuss, and even in a short paragraph, you need to explain how you prepare the data before start the analyzing. how you deals with the missing values, for example, missing data. Have you excluded them, or there are some procedures that you use in order to deal with the missing data, and then the data is ready, and then going to the analyzing part and providing the software probably that you use, the reason behind of selecting that tools and software, and the statistical methods that you use all need to be justified. If you want to use the regression analysis, probably you need to provide even a short um, paragraph to justify why regression analysis is good for it. Although the reviewers know why you use, but you need to present them that you also know why you choose the regression, for example, analysis for your data analysis as well. This is a helpful figure that I borrowed from Creswell book that please consult with it, which is giving you an overall picture about the quantitative, qualitative, and combinations of the two methods when you are setting up your research methods. And again, back to my previous statement about the research methods, which is looks like a recipe for your work. Uh, you need to bring all inclusion and exclusion criteria. Again, this is the summary of what we talked till this stage. The outcomes that you measured need to be reflected in the methods. Variables of the study, it is very important. What are the variables and how you reach to these variables? By doing a literature review, by looking at the problems, and you must have a good background of literature when you're identifying the variables of the study that should be reflected in the overall methodology and methods of the research, and give references for standard methods that using, and explain the ethical issues. How you deals with ethics nowadays, it is important to get ethics approval for the research. I'm not sure still at USN at the time that I was there, it wasn't compulsory for PhD or master students to get ethics approval before conducting and collecting the data. But in many universities nowadays, you're not able, even at master degree, uh, the students are not allowed to collect any data before they taking all approval, getting all approval related to the ethics matter. Therefore, you need to explain that the process of ethics for the data collections in your research as well. Um, what reviewers looking for when they looking at your paper? I uh, provided in two directions: in the technical quality of the paper and the novelty of it. There are papers that they have no technical quality. What does it mean? The collection of the data is in question. You talk about the quantitative research, but you only put your focuses, for example, in one case study. It is a small one, not enough number of participants involved, and even there are research and the papers that we reviewed that I saw everyone included in the paper in the data collection, but the nature of the study is looks like to only include top managers because it's asking about, for example, the strategy of the organizations. But they included everyone. At the end of the day, it is very difficult to get any conclusion. There is no novelty with that research. You make sure that that paper will get rejected because there is no technical quality about the data, and also there is no novelty. But sometimes the paper has very good number of data. For example, you collected 10,000 questionnaires from project managers all around the world about the different areas related to the project management body of knowledge. It means that you have very good number of data, but the novelty with your study is not at that level. Probably you will face to the questions or will get some major corrections from the reviewers in the best scenario. In the worst scenario, maybe you get rejected because the degree of novelty is not there. High ranked journals, which we call them as a 4-star journals, looking for quality novelty together. But in some cases, not the top ranked journals, some probably Q2 or Q3 journals or maybe Q4 journals, maybe looking for quality data. Still, if the novelty is not there, you just repeating something others done. Maybe you get chance to be accepted. If you don't have a technical quality, it means that your data is not generalizable, right? You don't have enough number of samples for your study, but the idea that you have is very novel idea. Still, we have a question mark on that. You probably get major corrections even if you send your paper to top ranked journals. If the novelty with your paper, maybe they advise you, which we had one paper like that, that they said that the novelty is there, but we advise you to collect more data in order to generalize your idea before you may get the chance of major correction and continue to collect more data and improve the technical part of the paper to be able to be accepted. And the best scenario will happen when you have good data, good method of data collection, good method of data analysis, and also the concept of novelty is with your research. Then it's increase your chance to be in the green area and be accepted. I talked too much, and at this point, I just want to provide some practical advices that I, from my experience, and also some from the journal papers that I submitted, and the author's guide in parts of the methodology and methods that you use for the research that may help you also to provide a better roadmap for yourself when you are writing for high-ranked journals. Ensure the method section in your paper is not too long. Sometimes you will provide maybe 5 pages only for the method sections of your paper. No need to be too long, but you need to bring all necessary support and information related to the method that you selected. You can do lots of things by referencing to others in the method section. Yeah, I use, for example, regression test because of that, and it is advised by this, and that. Therefore, no need to provide all the justifications behind of selecting this experiment or this method of data collection or this method of data analysis. But you need to bring them, but avoid of providing too long uh, explanations about the methods that you choose for each part of the paper, right? The field study results are more likely to be accepted if you have more than a single technique of data collection, especially as mentioned earlier, if you have a combination of qualitative and quantitative, or if you want to do the qualitative research, you can make advantage from interviews, focus group, and probably some form of observation as well. Then it will increase your chance to be accepted. If you want to do the research based on the survey and interview, it will increase your chance of getting accepted by many journals. Um, Validate the questionnaire skills or construct. It is very important that you show that if you're using a questionnaire survey, that questionnaire is already validated. You use the standard one or you develop by yourself, you did the pilot test, these are the results of pilot test. Even in one paragraph, you need to explain that the way that the questionnaire or the survey and the sketch has been validated. Articles with strong research methods, and particularly those that use longitudinal design, have higher chance of acceptance, especially when you conduct your research or repeat them in different times. You bring the concept of time series in your research. It is areas that recently is very uh, interested by many researchers and also many high ranked journals. They want to know that what happened, for example, with the current COVID-19 situations, the pre, during, and the post-COVID. You can do your research on that areas. Before the COVID, what was that? If you have some data during the COVID-19, for example, what's the consequences and your prediction for post-COVID by developing a survey and having the data at different times. Some countries may be past the COVID and therefore you can collect some data from the post-COVID from them. Many high-ranked journals welcome articles that deploy novel or emerging research methods. Uh, it is especially in the experimental studies, right? Uh, if new equipment, new tools, new ways of dealing with the design, for example, or doing your experiment is existed, you can make advantage from them, and also it increase your chance of getting accepted. Declare all data that were gathered and their stopping rules, right? Why, for example, you collected the data for 3 months, not for 6 months, and why you only collected, for example, 120 samples, why you only collected 150, for example, survey. These are all need to be explained in your methodology sections, and not just selective reports about what data that you have. Sometimes you need to talk about the failed or significant or insignificant data that you collected. Some of your hypotheses may be rejected. Therefore, you need to justify them. You need to bring the data related to insignificant results that probably you get. This is also important to be in the paper. And all empirical paper must include background information about the data set and the sample and the context that you use. Uh, you need to describe how the problem was studied at the end, include detailed information to allow repetitions of your study by others. Do not describe previously published procedures, but cite them. It's help you to make the sections of methods in your paper shorter, but at the same time also you will inform the readers or reviewers that you already aware about the methods and you did proper literature review to justify the method that you selected for the study. Identify the equipment and materials, as mentioned earlier, and use proper notation, including the formula and the symbols if you have, especially when you making advantage from some formula in doing the analysis. You need to provide all the abbreviations, all the formula and symbols, and don't forget to present the control variables that probably you used in your research. Right. This is the case study. If you go to menti.com and using 5226727, you will get the case study. Right. Good. Uh, in about maybe about 5 minutes, you just go through this part, and then um, I will show you the next slides that you are able to share your answer to probable issues that you detected for this case study. You just write in general forms, right? In three key points that you think are as issues with this case study as a method part for a paper, for a journal paper. Okay, one more minute. Okay, I'm going to share the next, and you will get this chance to type the three main issues that you think were with this case as a method section for a journal paper. Share your ideas here and let others also to see what you think about this part of a paper, and if you are a reviewer, what will be your suggestions or comments to the author or authors. Would anyone able to type anything? Yeah, right. Okay, good. Okay, right. Doing quantitative research, you think it is a problem with the method sections, right? So quantitative research method type, right? Latest, probably. You mean the latest methods not discussed well? Some parts to details, yeah, some parts not explained well. Method type that's selected may not be very well defined. Number of participants will be in questions. Quantity, right, right. Two details, we have the same. Number of participants, the survey, right, very good. Method type, multi-stage, right? Life cycle. There are very good ideas came from you guys since we are, I think, passing the time. If you look through the case study, you will identify that they selected 10 projects. Geographical location is not clearly defined in the method sections. 10 projects. What's the criteria of choosing 10? How you selected the 10? Why only 10? And these are the key areas. The survey, how the survey developed. Is it a standard survey or you develop by yourself? What's the sources? What's the references that you use? These are the key areas when you have such big issues with your data collection, then it provide a negative sense to your reviewers. And this paper unfortunately get rejected because of um, the idea was good, but the way that they collected the data, the way that they analyzed the data, not at that level. This is the reason that we said that quality is not with the research, although the idea and it's conducted somewhere in Africa, in South Africa, but it has not been clearly explained on the method section, the criteria that they use, how they want to generalize. It would be better to conduct this study in qualitative rather than quantitative, because you have a limited cases, and for a specific region or areas, maybe this is the first time you want to do this research, it's probably better to do it in the qualitative way. I think I 3 minutes past the time that allocated to me. I stop at this point.